Bonnie by Mr. Scary Story. When I was 12 years old, my brother Jake found a rabbit. I guess you could say the rabbit found him. We were tossing the baseball around when out of the woods came a small black rabbit. I remember thinking it was strange, as most of the rabbits in the forest near our home were brown cottontails. It immediately took a liking to him, coming close and even allowing him to pet it. When we continued playing catch, it just sat and watched. That evening, when the sun was going down and we returned to the house, the rabbit followed. The next morning, when we woke up, Jake opened the back door and the rabbit was right where we had left it. He named it Bonnie. You know, Bonnie Bunny. The way a 6-year-old child's mind works. It was summer, and we spent a lot of time outside, the two of us. No matter where we went or what we did, Bonnie was with us. Hiked to the creek, Bonnie close in tow. Playing catch, Bonnie sitting watching. Even when we went down to the local baseball fields to meet some friends and play, Bonnie found her way there and sat just outside the fence watching. I started to feel a bit uneasy about the whole thing. It was strange how smart Bonnie was, and the way she followed us everywhere, especially Jake. There was rarely a time when Bonnie wasn't around. I started noticing her outside our window at night when we slept. My parents at first wouldn't budge with letting Bonnie into the house, but eventually they relented and Bonnie became an indoor-outdoor pet. When we tried to take her to the vet to get shots, she absolutely freaked out, shrieking in an almost inhuman way. She bit the veterinarian on the hand and writhed so hard when being held, we could tell it was hurting her. The vet was obviously tested for rabies, and when the results came back negative, my parents accepted that as enough and let her be after that. Bonnie would even sleep next to Jake at night. Although my parents weren't thrilled by the idea, they didn't really have a choice, as both Bonnie and Jake would wail and cry if this was denied. The two would do everything together. The little black rabbit was always right behind Jake at all times. Eventually, I grew to resent Bonnie. I felt like she was taking my little brother away from me. One day, I was feeling particularly left out, and when Jake was in the bathroom, I took Bonnie outside and shut the door on her. When I looked through the window, I could see her staring at me. I don't know how to explain it, but she looked angry with me. It was as if she was scowling and her eyes narrowed. It gave me quite an uncomfortable feeling. When Jake came out of the bathroom, he asked where Bonnie had gone. I told him I didn't know, but the next moment a banging could be heard from the back door. I saw through the glass that Bonnie was hurling herself against the door hard enough it surely was hurting her. Jake asked me how she got out there, and I told him it seemed like she wanted to go outside, so I let her out. He didn't believe me and started keeping an even closer eye on her and shooting me dirty looks. One day, while Jake was taking a nap, I was sitting on the couch watching TV. I heard a loud crash next to me, and startled, I looked over. The ornate lamp we had on our end table lay smashed on the floor. Bonnie was sitting on top of the table, staring daggers knowingly. I couldn't believe my eyes. How had she been clever enough to do that in spite of me? I became very afraid and went to tell my parents. Of course, my parents never believed me when I told them. I was scolded for the umpteenth time not to play ball in the house and grounded for a week. I became very wary of Bonnie after that. The more I tried to keep my distance, the more she would come around, always staring right at me with her big black eyes. There was something not quite right about that rabbit, but I couldn't place it. The next Friday was my dad's birthday. Birthdays were a big deal in my house, and this was Dad's 50th. My mom went all out with the decorations and bought him a custom cake that was elegant and very expensive. We were still setting up the house before my dad got home from work when I heard a noise coming from the fridge. I was hanging up a few streamers around the kitchen, and the noise continued until it was unignorable. I put down the decorations and carefully crept up to the fridge, fear of the unknown causing my arm to shake as I reached out. Inside the fridge was Bonnie. She had been eating my dad's cake, her whole face covered with frosting. She'd eaten almost half the cake before I heard the noise and came to investigate. I yelped out of fear and she jumped down from the fridge and onto the floor before I could grab her. She hopped away and into the living room. The next second, my mom rounded the corner. "What is going on in..." Her voice trailed off. She was looking from me to the cake with a look of anger and confusion. "What have you done?" I saw the look of genuine disappointment on my mother's face, and I knew the situation was bad. It looked like I had been caught red-handed. It wasn't me, it was Bonnie. "Liar!" Jake had followed my mom in and yelled in disagreement. "I swear, she was just here. I heard her in the fridge, and when I opened it, she was just sitting there eating. Please, you have to believe me." Jake was glaring at me, a look of hatred. My mother looked more angry by the second. "Upstairs. Upstairs," she shouted at me. "But now!" I followed her instructions with tears in my eyes. How was this happening to me, and why did no one believe me? I went to my room, frustrated and wondering where Bonnie went to. If only they had seen the frosting on her face, then they would have believed me. How could she have gotten in the fridge in the first place? I thought to myself. Later that evening, I heard my father come home, and Jake and Mom greeting him with happy birthdays. I didn't hear anything after that as I laid in bed and cried. Jake came into our room a few hours later, Bonnie in his arms, face free of frosting. "There's something wrong with that thing," I said, pointing at Bonnie. "You're just mad because she likes me better." Jake was holding Bonnie tightly up to his chest, pouting at me. "No, there's seriously something wrong. She's smarter than a normal animal, Jake." "I know," he said, beaming. She got me in trouble, and she stares at me." I was angry now, rising up from my seat to confront them both. "Listen, Bonnie is my pet anyway, not yours. Leave her alone, and you know what? Leave me alone too." With that, Jake retreated to his fort he and my dad had built and left me alone to ponder on the situation. The next day, I tried to make amends. I asked Jake if he wanted to play ball, but he turned me down, pouting and brushing by me on his way outside. I saw him through the window playing with Bonnie. She ran around the yard as he chased her. Before long, I saw Barney dart into the woods. Jake followed. My instincts as an older brother kicked in immediately. Jake was far too young to play in the woods alone. He could get hurt or lost. I ran downstairs and put on my shoes. I had to follow them and make sure Jake was okay. I also planned to scold him when I got the chance. Once outside, I ran into the woods in the same area I saw Bonnie and Jake enter. They had a head start, but I was confident I could catch up. After about an hour, however, I still hadn't seen any sign of them. I was beginning to worry. The sun would be setting soon, and I was coming to a realization that not only was Jake most likely lost, I was too. I started to just run blindly through the woods, tears in my eyes, calling out for my brother, and when all of a sudden, I came upon a house. This house had truly no business being out there. It was in the middle of a small clearing with trees flanking it on all sides. The house itself was very old and small. A wooden structure with a thatch roof. I had a very unfortunate suspicion that Jake was in there. I crept up to the window and looked inside. What I saw will haunt me forever. Inside the small wooden house was a woman, old and haggard. She was dressed in all black with a black hat on top of her wispy silver hair. Her skin was incredibly pale and heavily wrinkled. Her eyes gray and her nose long and hooked. The woman was standing over a wooden table. On the table was my brother cut into pieces. His blood was dripping through the slats of the wood and onto the floor. The witch held a long knife and was using it to cut fingers from his severed arm. His head was facing me, a look of fear permanently etched into his face. Before I stopped myself, I screamed out loud. The witch's head whipped around instantly, and she smiled a long, crooked smile from the other side of the window. I turned to run, but before I could make it even a few steps, the witch waved her arm and my whole body froze. The fear was unimaginable. I stood frozen while she slowly hovered towards me, her feet inches off the ground as the door to the house flew open on its own. She waved her other hand, and graciously, I went to sleep. I woke up later. How much later, I have no way of knowing. I rubbed sleep and tears from my eyes and took in my surroundings. I was being held in a cage about 5 feet off the ground. The swinging adding to the nausea. Jake still lay dead on the table, but significantly more cut up at this point. The witch was standing over him, adding pieces of his body to a large black cauldron. The witch was struggling with a large black crow, holding it tightly in her thin, wrinkled hands. She brought the bird up to her mouth, jagged teeth showing as she bit into its neck. The squawking was terrible as the crow struggled in her grasp. She held the bleeding bird over the bubbling cauldron and let the blood fall into the liquid. With the addition, the mixture turned a dark green color, and the witch discarded the bird into the corner of the house. A large pile of corvid skeletons lay underneath. She was muttering things in a language I couldn't understand as she stirred the cauldron with a massive wooden spoon, every once in a while adding a piece of Jake into the mixture. I was crying now, tears and mucus streaming from my face. I wanted to scream, but no sound would come out. The witch turned to face me and floated over with a small glass vial. She held the vial under my eye, her bloody hands reeking of copper. She paralyzed me again, but the tears kept flowing. A few drops collecting in the bottom of the small glass tube. She then went back to her cauldron and poured them in. I was held in that cage overnight, the whole time crying, but unable to move. When light began to filter through the window, she returned to me. She came close to the cage and leaned in to smell me. She pulled back, looking a bit put off. Quickly, she shot out a hand, with incredible strength pulled my hand to her mouth. She bit my left index finger clean off at the base. The pain was incredible. I tried to scream, but she had some kind of control over me. Still, that wouldn't allow me to verbalize anything. Instead, silent tears erupted from my swollen eyes. The witch stood there, chewing my finger with a look of disgust. She spit the mashed appendage onto the floor and glared up at me. She waved a hand and sleep overtook me. I woke up lying in the grass, covered in sweat. I got up quickly and looked around. I was in the woods, but a familiar area. I could see my house through the trees. Sobbing, I ran through my backyard and into the house. I told my parents about Bonnie, and of course they didn't believe me. I don't blame them. I mean, the story that a witch ate my little brother was too far-fetched, even to me, and I lived it. I did have to go to the hospital for my missing finger, which had begun to fester and smelled putrid. In the end, the police told my parents that we were most likely kidnapped, and a child psychologist came to the conclusion that the witch was a manifestation to my fragile brain. I wish that was the truth, but somehow I still know it was Bonnie. It was the witch.